Want a skirt that flatters every body shape and is beginner friendly to sew? Let me show you how to draft the perfect darted A-line skirts. Hi everyone, welcome back to Curve and Stitch, or if you're new here, I am Helena and I love sharing easy sewing projects for beginners. Let's get right into it. These are the tools you need. This is the measurement required. Start by leaving about 2 inches before drawing the waist guideline. From the waist guideline, measure and mark your waist to hip measurement, which in this case is 8 inches. So, from the waist, I'll measure and mark 8 inches like so. Draw a straight line to create the hip guideline. From the waist guideline, measure and mark your waist to hem measurement, which in this case, I'm using 20 inches. So I'll measure and mark 20 inches for the skirt length or waist to hem measurement. Draw a straight line to create the hem guideline. Now we need to work on our waist. So, on the waist guideline, measure and mark 1/4 of your waist circumference measurement plus half an inch dart. Now on the hip guideline, measure and mark 1/4 of your hip circumference measurement plus ease. So the hip circumference plus ease measurement I'm using is 8 inches. So I'll measure and mark 8 inches like so. Now we need to shape the waist. So on the waist guideline, on the point we made, we'll go up by half an inch. Then we will join this mark, that's the half-inch mark, to the waist guideline with a curve like so. Now we need to shape the side seam, so we will join the waist to the hip with a curve like so. Now on the hem guideline, measure and mark 1/4 of your hip circumference plus 3 inches for the flare. Join the hem to the hip line with a slanted line like so. Now we need to add our dart to the skirt, so we will look for the midpoint of the waistline. Mark the midpoint. Then, from the midpoint mark, measure down 3.5 inches for the dart length. I'm just making sure that the dart line is a straight line. Divide the dart you added to the waistline equally on each side of the dart line you've just made. Join these marks to the dart line with a wedge line like so. Now let's add a little bit of style to the hemline. So I'll measure up 1 inch and mark. Then I'll join this mark to the hem with a curve like so. Now let's go ahead and add our seam allowances to it. So I'm adding 1 inch seam allowance to the hemline, then ½ inch seam allowance to the side seam line, then ½ inch seam allowance to the waistline. Join these points to create the seam allowances lines. The front part of the skirt is ready. Go ahead and label all the parts, then cut it out. Now let's go ahead and draft the back part of the skirt. So we will start by drawing the waist guideline just as we did for the front. Now we need to create our center back line. Since this is the back, we will need to add zip allowance to it. So we would measure and mark 1 inch from the center, the original center back, to create a new center back line, like so. The length of the center back line should be the same as the skirt length measurement, which in this case is 20 inches. So I'll measure and extend the line to 20 inches like so. Working on our waist guideline, we will measure 1/4 of our waist measurement plus 1 inch dart. Then go up by half an inch and join it back to the waist guideline with a curve like so. Now measure and mark your waist to hip measurement just as we did for the front. So in this case it's 8 inches. So from the waist I'll measure down 8 inches and mark like so. Then I will create the hip guideline. So on the hip guideline, measure and mark your hip circumference plus ease measurement. So in this case it's 8 inches. So I'll measure and mark 8 inches like so. Now we need a hemline. So I'll measure from the waist down 20 inches, which is the waist to hem measurement we are using. Then I'll create the hem line or the hem guideline. Draw the hem guideline like so. So on the hem guideline, measure and mark 8 inches, which is the hip measurement, plus 3 inches for the A shape. Join the hem line to the hip line like so. Join the hip line to the waistline with a curve like so. Now we need to place our dart. So we will look for the midpoint of the waist and mark. Divide the darts you added equally on both sides of the points like so. Now we need the length of the dart. So I'm just making sure that the line is straight down. So I'll measure down 5 inches for the length of the dart like so. Draw the dart like so. Now let's go ahead and add our seam allowances to it. So I'll add ½ inch seam allowance to the waist, ½ inch seam allowance to the side seam line, then 1 inch seam allowance to the down part. Before that, let's go ahead and start the hemline just as we did for the front by going up 1 inch, then curving it to the hemline like so. Join the points to create the seam allowance lines. Fold the back just as we did for the front, then we'll cut it out. And just like that, you've got a custom fit A-line skirt pattern. If this tutorial helped you, smash the like button so I know you enjoyed it. Subscribe for more stress-free sewing tutorials. Comment below and let me know what other pattern you would love to see next.